welcome to Real Talk Divorce San Diego. Today's topic is the 2018 wrap-up for divorce. It's the end of the year and we have lots of issues to cover. My name is Lynn Waldman. I am one of your co-hosts. I am a therapist and divorce coach, and you can find me at divorcecounselingcenter.com. And my other co-hosts are Shawn Skillin, family law attorney extraordinaire, and Mark Hill, certified divorce financial analyst. So our topics today, well, Shawn, why don't you first tell us a little bit about your practice?
So I have a mediation and collaborative divorce practice. I only do cases that stay out of court, so my job is to keep you out of court as you transition from your intact family to your divorced family. And you can reach me at ShawnSkillinLaw.com or 619-299-4880.
And Mark?
Yeah, I'm Mark Hill. I'm a certified financial planner, certified divorce financial analyst. Started Pacific Divorce Management back about, 17, 18 years ago. We specialize in the financial aspects of divorce.
So one of the things we were going to talk about today is kind of the year-end cleanup, having to do with taxes and kind of getting an idea of where people are now at the end of the year with their divorce. What questions should people be thinking about? What should they be asking themselves from a legal perspective and a financial perspective?
Well, from a legal perspective, I think people need to look back at their agreement. They either have a judgment that was rendered by the judge in court or an agreement that they came up with together. And that agreement is going to have assigned them certain responsibilities. So they want to make sure that if they got divorced this year, let's say, that they're tying up all the little loose ends, like separating their car insurance, changing the beneficiaries on life insurance policies, retirement policies, and that they're doing those kind of things as they were told to do it or agreed to do it in their divorce agreement. So they need to check that and make sure they're doing it. Sometimes the kids are the beneficiaries, sometimes the ex-spouse is the beneficiary, or only to a certain extent. So all of those kind of things need to be taken care of. Another common thing is bonuses. So a lot of times child and spousal support is based on the base pay of the higher earner, but if they tend to get bonuses or commissions, then there's either a table or an agreed upon percentage of that amount that they're supposed to pay to the other person. And a lot of people now are getting their year-end bonuses. So if you owe a portion of your bonus to your ex-spouse, be sure that you look at your MSA, you know what you're supposed to pay them and when, that you send them a copy of the pay stub reflecting the bonus or commission, and to get all that kind of stuff straightened out. So also if it's spousal support, you want to make sure that it's paid this year so that you can deduct it in this year's taxes when that comes up.
And often there are insurance policies that are put in place in order to ensure support. And the MSA, the marital settlement agreement that you signed when you got divorced, will actually say you have to show that you have this still in force. And so things like that people often overlook, and it can be devastating if something were to happen and then for some reason a beneficiary got changed or an insurance policy lapsed.
And those are things that people commonly kind of forget about because it's like they've worked through all of this stuff, they've finally signed the MSA, it's gotten through the court, and everybody kind of takes a big sigh of relief, and then they forget to take care of some of these details. So look through your MSA, call your lawyer, call your mediator, make sure that you've gone through and done all these things. And then sometimes, like Mark said, there are annual things that you're required to do, like provide the proof of the existence of the life insurance policy and who the beneficiary is and what the death benefit is. Sometimes you agree that you're going to exchange income information every year, and sometimes that's at the end of the year, sometimes it's at tax time. But now is a good time to kind of take a look at those agreements and make sure that you're doing everything that you need to do. The other big thing is if you just got divorced this year, or if you've been divorced recently, is you need a new will and trust. So get in touch with an estate planning attorney and make sure that all of those things are taken care of as well.
And now if somebody did need a referral to an estate planning attorney, they could call either one of you for referrals for that kind of information, because that seems really important, especially if you're divorced now. You don't want to be out there without a plan for your estate or what would happen.
Not every divorced spouse wants their ex to get everything they have at their death. You're correct in assuming that.
Yes, yeah. So if someone got divorced and they still have their same trust and estate, I mean, what happens with that if they have forgotten that they need to?
If they still have assets in it, that's how they will be disposed at their demise.
Okay.
So
That's how it works. You have to not just say, oh, well, I'm going to dissolve my trust. I've heard people say that. I say, well, what does that mean? Well, it's not going to exist anymore. Well, what does that mean? What it means is you need to take the assets out of the trust.
Yes.
And then it kind of dies of its own accord, frankly.
And you have to put it in a new trust.
Or into your single name, or, you know, there's obviously different options of how you can custody an asset. You may choose to put it in your children's names or in joint tenants with your children. There's all sorts of different ways to go, but again, you, as Shawn just so effectively put it, you got to look at this stuff, because otherwise you end up in a situation where what was not anticipated occurs. Let's put it that way. The other thing I will say, and it's not necessarily related to year end, but being aware of, in second marriage situations, what happens with the beneficiaries on retirement accounts. We've seen all sorts of messes with that. Husband and wife both have a second marriage. One dies, his retirement account passes to her. She dies, all goes to her children. That was not the intent, but they died quickly after each other. It's a real case I had years ago. And so his children got nothing. And they actually fired me. I lost the account over the whole thing because they were so furious with me. Nothing I could have done about it. So.
But these are things people need to think about.
And to talk to an estate planning attorney.
Yes.
That's the key.
And when you're healthy and well and working, you might not think about what consequences could happen. And so, so it is a matter of planning ahead for the
And
worst
you know, a
case
lot
scenario.
of people set up their will and their trust and the beneficiaries on their life insurance policies, which may be purchased outside of the will and the trust. And they do that maybe after the birth of their first child. And then they don't think about it after the birth of the second child, the third child, the fourth child, or after the divorce. So what I like to do in any divorce is get copies of all those documents so that we can look at it and kind of do an assessment of, you know, oh, what did we write down way back when we bought that life insurance policy 10, 15, 20 years ago? And then people can talk about what do they want to do with it going forward. And the same with your retirement beneficiary, your 401k, your IRAs. People often designate the beneficiaries at the time they open or establish those accounts, which could have been years and years ago. So it may, even if you're still married, it may not be set up the way that you would want to have it set up now. So I like the end of the year or the beginning of the year as a time when people go back and review all of that stuff and make sure it's set up together. In your divorce, you probably addressed how you want your 401k, your IRA beneficiaries, your life insurance beneficiaries, how they're supposed to be set up. And so it's a good, when you get that MSA back from the court, you need to follow through on that stuff. That's not stuff that your lawyer is usually going to do for you. It's up to you. And like Mark said, if you then get remarried and you go to your employer and you set up wife number 2 or husband number 2 as the beneficiaries of your retirement plan, and your divorce agreement said, nope, it was supposed to be ex-wife number 1, then if you die, you've set up a problem in probate court where the 2 ex-wives are going to be battling out who gets that money. Because the retirement plan is going to want to give it to wife number 2. Wife number 1 is going to go in and say, no, this order said he was supposed to do that. So
You know, I just, listening to you, I thought about something that happened this week. Have a client who lives abroad who is getting remarried. She's in her late 50s, early 60s, has been divorced for years. She's urgently now trying to get the money out of ex-husband's retirement account at a big college in Southern California. And I said to her, how long have you been divorced now? She goes, oh, about 13 years. They never did a quadro. It says they have to do a quadro. She says, I called them and they told me that he could just write a letter. I'm saying, that's not going to work. So it's these kind of things that perhaps you don't think about at the time, but as Shawn says, if you don't address them, You're setting yourself up.
And for our listeners, a quadro is?
Sorry, a qualified domestic relations order. It's an order of the court. It's signed by the judge. It's attached to the back of the MSA, and it literally says this allows you to transfer funds from a retirement account without any taxes or penalties.
So did they not have that at all, or they just never followed
They
through
never
with
did
it?
it.
They
They
never did
agreed
it.
what the split was going to be. They agreed everything, and she's let it sit there for 13 years.
So part of our 2018 divorce wrap-up is making sure that you have these things done,
Right.
and that you execute them.
Correct.
And that's really important because people do discuss what's going to happen with the retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, Roth IRAs, pensions during the divorce. And it probably is set out in either your judgment or your marital settlement agreement. In my cases, I make people get their quadros done before they are finished with the MSAs so that I know that that stuff's been done and served on the plan administrator. But your MSA may not say that. It may say that you're both going to get it done in the future. And that, again, is one of those things that people usually have fall through the cracks because they don't follow up. So if you were awarded an interest in your ex-spouse's retirement plan, either an IRA, a Roth IRA, a 401k, a 403b, or a pension, go back to that MSA and see what it said. If there's one attached to the MSA that's been signed by the judge, make sure it's been sent to the plan administrator. If your MSA said get it done at some point in the future, make sure that it gets done. Again, if it's not done and filed with the plan administrator and your ex remarries and assigns the new spouse as the beneficiary, you're going to be out of luck. So make sure it's done. And it could have been done and not be attached to the back of your MSA because sometimes they're sent in as a separate document. It would be in your court file. If you don't have a copy of it, call your mediator, call your divorce lawyer. Make sure that you have that document in place and served on the plan administrator. It's not enough to just have it in the court file. It needs to be served on the plan administrator.
So it sounds like this could be fraught with chaos if clients aren't getting good advice, understanding the quadro process and what needs to happen. And in our experience as collaborators and working with the Collaborative Practice Group of San Diego, I think we have seen that it's not uncommon that one client might be more savvy or have more financial information and understand it better than the other. And what would you guys suggest in those kind of situations where one client does understand finances better?
Find a way to level the playing field.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking in terms of when they approach going into the divorce itself?
It could be that. It could be that maybe throughout the divorce they still kind of don't understand the quadro process or what that means.
Right. I would say that get yourself an education, get yourself support, get people around you who can advise you. I think that's the most critical thing, is to admit what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And there are experts out there who can assist. Back to what you said about going on with retirement accounts, there's an attorney who I worked with probably 20 years ago in Colorado who back then said there are ticking time bombs sitting in, this is the exact quote, sitting time bombs that are in lawyers' file cabinets, this was before we had cloud storage, all ticking all over the country that will go off as the baby boomers retire in numbers.
So now they're not ticking in the clients in the attorney's file cabinets, they're ticking in the cloud above us.
They're ticking in the cloud,
Yeah,
exactly.
they're ticking in the cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But it's a really common thing that people, like I said earlier, just the divorce is done, there's a big sigh of relief, and they forget to follow up on these things.
Yeah.
And things like quadros and designating beneficiaries can really have drastic negative effects if you don't get it done. So you need to check and get it done. So go back and read those MSAs and figure out what it is. Call the attorney that helped you with your divorce. Make sure that those things are all wrapped up and taken care of.
And so that's also a good reason why it makes sense to once a year review where you are, review.
Yeah, if there's ongoing support and
Yes.
if it's tied to income, you need to look at it every year, and you may need to sit down with your ex-spouse or even with a third party to help determine what, how the divorce decree should be interpreted based upon last year's income. So that's fairly common. One final thing on the retirement accounts. We've had challenges doing distributions from IRAs recently with a number of custodians who basically have the MSA. They're supposed to act on the MSA. They cannot demand a quadro, but we are finding that lower level people are demanding a quadro from firms like Fidelity. I had a situation with a client, and I just told her to keep going up the ladder, and eventually she got to the legal department and they said, oh no, that's fine. We can accept the MSA for an IRA. But again, they don't necessarily know. You may not get the exact correct information.
Right. So that's when the client needs the support and the suggestion of just keep trying, keep going up the ladder.
Yeah.
And that's really common. That's happened to me over the years, that the first person you talk to at your brokerage house doesn't understand what's needed to divide an IRA or a Roth IRA. And again, you just keep going up the ladder. And sometimes the first person in the legal department doesn't know either. But they usually have somebody in the legal department that deals specifically with the division of IRAs and Roth IRAs that you can talk to. They're going to have more paperwork that you're going to fill out. They're going to want copies, sometimes a certified copy of certain parts of the MSA. And there's often another fee that the brokerage house will charge you to divide the IRA. But you need to take the MSA into the brokerage house and have it divided. Nothing magical happens just because the judge signed your MSA. You have to follow up on that stuff. So look at your MSA and follow up if you need to.
So I would like to say, if any of our viewers have questions, please feel free to type in your questions. We're happy to answer any questions that come up for you. And I'd also like our viewers to know that Shawn and Mark and I are all part of the Collaborative Practice Group of San Diego, which is a work group of attorneys and divorce financial analysts and divorce coaches who help people get through divorce, keeping their resources intact. It's a client-centered approach to divorce. And so we have recently changed our name to Collaborative Practice San Diego. So we are now also part of our practice is also going to be trust and estates attorneys in collaborative practice.
Yeah, our feeling around that was that this is eventually, precisely the same issues, because you're dealing with families and you're dealing with money and emotions, and those are the two things we deal with in divorce. So it's a natural part of it. It's the way the movement is evolving, and we're excited to be a part of it here in San Diego.
We are, and I would like to also remind our listeners that we do have the Divorce Options Workshop. It's the first Saturday of every month from 9 to noon in Carmel Valley, where you can get your questions answered about the process. And we like to say that once you've decided to divorce, which is a very difficult decision to make, the next most important question is how. How do you go through the process? And that's what we talk about in our Divorce Options Workshop. And in fact, we are hosting, the three of us, the next Divorce Options Workshop, which is on Friday, January 5th.
Saturday,
sorry.
Saturday, January 5th, 9 to 12, Carmel
Saturday,
Valley.
January 5th, yes.
And you can go to our website, Collaborative Family Law San Diego, and click on the Divorce Options button to register for that or any of the classes later in the year.
So that kind of brings us to, for people that are going to be considering divorce in the coming year, what do they need to start thinking about? What paperwork should they be getting together? We're going to talk about the kids a little bit.
I think the first thing I would say is take a deep breath and do exactly what you just said. Think about how you're going to divorce. As opposed to getting frightened, running out, hiring an attorney, and getting on what I term the divorce escalator. Very hard to get off once you start that. So think about how you want to do that. And in fact, if you go to my website, there's a little sort of slide presentation that talks about the process of divorce, that kind of walks people through that. But there are practical things you need to consider doing too. Shawn, why don't you address those?
Well, I think the first practical thing is gather information. Information is power. You're going to make a lot of financial decisions in your divorce. And if you haven't been what we call the managing partner, the person who's been watching the bank accounts, paying the bills, getting the taxes done every year, then you need to go figure out what you've got and where it is. So just start collecting bank statements for checking accounts, savings accounts, money market accounts, anything on any kind of retirement account, any loans or credit cards that you have, car loans, mortgage payments, home equity lines, anything financial that has your name on it or your spouse's name on it. Just start collecting it, stick it in a box or a folder somewhere, and hang on to it so that when you do start the divorce process, you have some idea of where stuff is, and you can go back and get whatever information that you need. And Mark's right, try and stay calm, take big deep breaths, and just start gathering information. Go to the Divorce Options workshop. It's a great place to hear what kind of options are available to you, what the basic process looks like, to be able to ask some questions and just start gathering information to get yourself educated. Your divorce is probably the biggest financial situation that you're going to be involved in other than buying your house. So it's important to have information and to make fully informed decisions.
And I have noticed that sometimes when people are going through divorce, one spouse or the other gets very extremely anxious. They may have heard a threat or thought it was a threat from one spouse about where they're going to be living or how their lifestyle is going to change. And again, it's about taking a breath, maybe considering what that spouse is saying and realizing that it's playing on your worst fears. We want people to make informed decisions, have the best information possible, and not necessarily listening to what your spouse may be saying about you or to you. Because of course, when you're going through divorce, people just sometimes naturally are going to say hurtful things that maybe they don't actually mean or is actually not going to be true. So we don't want those emotions to get you off track from decision making and gathering information.
And also avoid the Greek chorus of divorce.
Yes.
Because it's not just your spouse talking about you. All your friends, your relatives are going to be talking to you, telling you how you need to approach this. I always say this to clients, when your friends or relatives start giving you advice, this is what I want you to hear. Blah, 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 blah. We love you, we're worried for you, we want the best for your future, blah, 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 blah. Trust me, their situation, if they were involved in a divorce, is different. It will have been different. If it may even be in a different state with different rules. But your situation will be unique. Accept their support and their love, but be very cautious about taking their advice.
I mean, honestly, there is no winning in divorce.
No.
What have you seen, Shawn and Mark, what have you guys seen through divorces that you've assisted with as the best possible outcome? What does that look like for clients?
Well, it always looks different. I mean, every family is different. The needs of the husband and the wife or both spouses, the children are all different. Their financial situation is different. So the thing about mediation and collaborative divorce is that you can have a team of people that help you decide, you as the two parties involved, you who know your children best, you who know your finances best, what the best outcome is for you. And so what we can help you do is try and get there in the most emotionally managed way possible. Mediation and collaborative divorce keeps things from escalating and getting out of control so that you're making decisions with very heightened, out of control emotions that aren't necessarily the best long-term decisions for you or your children or your other spouse. So that's what you're trying to get, is what is the best situation for us? And yes, both of you may have a lower standard of living. It's very unlikely that one of you is going to be homeless or living in a shack or a van down by the river. Those are usually threats that are made in anger. Sometimes they're manipulative, but that's usually not the case. You will have a decreased standard of living, but everybody should be able to have a home with a roof over their head and a place for the kids.
What helps these clients get through divorce? Like, what helps them have the best divorce possible? In your experience, what have you seen?
Well, in my experience is to not be in a rush, number one. So to gather information, like I said earlier, all the financial information, to talk to a financial planner who has information in divorce, to maybe talk to a divorce coach who can help you deal with some of the emotions that are coming up, and if you have children, to get a child specialist involved. So figure out what's going on with your kids and how to approach your kids and not put them in the middle, in a way that both of you can support them and you can continue relationships with the children with both parents and move forward in a positive way. I will say this also, be careful about what you say to the rest of your relatives and your close friends. If you're divorcing your spouse and you start saying all these horrible things about your spouse, then your kids are going to hear that either at school because their friends have heard it from their parents, or you're going to destroy your children's relationship with their grandparents because they're not going to want to have anything to do with the other parent anymore. So they're going to hear bad things from the grandparents, the aunts and the uncles. So be careful and judicious in what you share with other people, taking into consideration what can get back to your kids through the grapevine.
I think it's, to some degree, it is focused around the children. What I mean by that is if you're able to negotiate your divorce in a way that you can successfully co-parent your children after divorce, I think that's success. I think what I've seen that has not succeeded is when there are still anger and resentment because the process did not work out, when to the degree that perhaps one individual felt their voice was being heard, the children are the only thing left to fight about. The financial settlement is done. You don't get to go back and revisit that unless it's been fraud. So what's left? The children. So you don't want to be using your children as the only last way to get back at your ex-spouse.
And I can tell you, in my experience as a divorce coach, that is one of the most traumatic things you can do to your kids, is to put them in the middle, give them adult and court information, have them be a messenger between the spouses, between the co-parents now. And one coping skill that I really like to teach clients is opposite action. So if you can become aware of whatever emotion you're feeling, if it's anger, resentment, a need to feel like you want to get back at your ex-spouse, what I ask clients to do is do the opposite of what you feel. And I know it sounds really counterintuitive, but if you really want to be angry, involve the kids, it's just going to create more trauma and more chaos, co-parenting and in the future. So if you can do the opposite of what you feel, and the question becomes, am I being effective to get to where I want to be in life, not just with your co-parent or ex-spouse? And I know you guys have also seen that happen, where divorced spouses have just kept the fight going.
Yeah, you know, there's so many emotions involved in a divorce. I mean, they're hurt, they're frustrated, they're angry, they feel betrayed, they may have guilt or shame if they had a substance abuse problem or a gambling problem, or they were the person that cheated on their spouse. There's so many things involved, and there's an overwhelming sense of fear and anxiety, which makes people act out often in anger. And the fear and anxiety permeates so many areas of their life. You know, where are they going to live? Are they going to have enough money? Are the kids going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Am I ever going to love somebody again? Is everybody going to love me again? Am I ever going to get married again? Am I going to die alone as an old man or an old lady? And so there's all these kind of anxieties that are involved in divorce that can be just overwhelming at first. So do remember that, number one, time is your friend. If you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious, then don't be making decisions right now. Wait until you feel calmer. Go to a therapist, get some support, get some help. You know, because there's just so many moving parts in a divorce, and you shouldn't be making decisions until some of those initial fears and anxieties have settled down.
I'd like to cast a slightly more optimistic view on this, because there are successful divorces,
Yes.
and there
There's
are
a lot of them.
There are
Yeah.
cases where couples, you know, we've done collaborative cases. I know where couples have said afterwards, "Boy, we learned some things in this. If we'd had some of these skills, I wonder if we would have divorced." And that's
Yes.
really an amazing thing to hear.
Yes.
So the process also can be, I think, empowering to the non-moneyed spouse who has not been involved in the finances, feels that he or she is not capable of it, perhaps it's beyond them, and through the divorce process with the right support they get themselves an education, and that allows them to be empowered and actually face their new life with some not just trepidation, but enthusiasm.
And it's not only the non-moneyed spouse that now has a better understanding, it's also the parent that was not as involved with the kids now has the opportunity to step up to the plate. The roles have changed, and now that parent has more of a relationship with their children than they had in the past ever. So in a way, that's kind of the silver lining through the trauma.
Yeah, and I mean, divorce is difficult going through it, but that's not to say that people don't end up doing divorce well. I know a lot of couples that do divorce well. They end up being better co-parents than they were parents living in the same house. I see women especially all the time become very empowered financially, as Mark was saying. They then realize what kind of position they put themselves in, and I had a client say to me just the other day, I'm going to make sure my children understand, that they understand about money, that they know how to balance a checkbook, that they know how to ask questions, that they know how to evaluate financial situations. So there are a lot of parents who, you know, the marriages have just deteriorated for whatever reason, and they aren't really being great co-parents living in the same house that do great living apart, but they have to keep the children in mind first. They have to deal with their own emotions and learn how to manage that. And so it can be a very positive experience. You are not destroying your family. You are transitioning your family from an intact family to a family that has a different structure where you live in two different houses, but you're still a family, and you're going to be a family until one of the spouses or all of your children are dead. And nobody wants that to happen. So figure out how to make it work.
But even after they might be dead, they're still going to have a story to tell, right?
There's always a story to tell. And I think that's something that Lynn, as a divorce coach, always talks about in Divorce Options, is what story do you want your children to tell about this divorce in the future? And I can tell you, I won't tell you how old I am, but I'm old enough. My parents were divorced when I was 3, 4, and 5. I have cousins that their parents were divorced when the youngest one got out of high school. And we still talk about our parents' divorces at family reunions. And we're like all in our 50s and 60s. So those divorce stories carry on through the generations.
Okay.
And so think about what story you want your kids to tell.
Okay, and the funny thing is my parents aren't divorced, and we still talk about their marriage and how they get along. So those family stories somehow, they just, they're unavoidable. So what story?
Yeah, so other than money, which is often a big concern, everybody's biggest other concern in divorce is how are the kids going to be? And the kids are going to take their cues from you, the parents. And so if you're anxious and you're worried and you're angry and you're always putting each other down, then your kids are going to be more stressed. If you can tell the kids, hey, it's going to be okay, yes, it's going to be different, and everybody can manage their emotions and keep a positive outlook, then the kids are going to adjust just fine.
And you know what I think is helpful? I've had clients come in and they've come up with a script and they've rehearsed, this is how we're going to tell the kids, this is when we're going to tell the kids. So they have a real, very well thought out plan for how they're going to tell their children. And, you know, surprisingly sometimes I think that the kids kind of already knew, and it's not quite as awful as the parents anticipated. I mean, it's never going to be an easy conversation, obviously, but kind of preparing and doing it together, if at all possible, is going to be better.
Keep the children as the focus. That's the key throughout it. It's so easy in divorce, and I have personal experience not just of working with clients, but going through it myself. It's so easy to focus everything internally. Am I going to be okay? Can I afford this? What is this going to mean for me personally? But if you think about every decision and you go, well, how is this going to affect the children? That will change your perception. And I think it's healthy also because it takes the focus away from the anxiety and it transfers it onto another anxiety perhaps for your children, but at least it's not inward, and those tend to be the most self-destructive.
Yes, and if you can give your children the space to talk about their thoughts and their feelings, and basically I tell my clients, put on your mommy therapist hat or your daddy therapist hat and let them talk about their thoughts and feelings, because it just gives them the space to kind of process what's going on, and you don't have to be defensive.
And if you have a collaborative divorce team you're working with, you will have a child specialist who will actually enable you not to have to put on your mommy's therapist hat or your daddy therapist hat.
Right.
So why don't we talk just a little bit about how the collaborative process works and what the roles are?
Well, the thing I love about the collaborative process, it is a client-centered client-driven process. So each client has an attorney, they'll each have a divorce coach, and then there's the financial neutral, like Mark, who would run the meetings. And clients can meet with the whole team. They might meet just with their coaches. If there's children, they will have a child specialist who could meet with the kids and assist the parents with talking to the children about the divorce.
I think of it as it's really just mediation with resources at the
Yes.
table.
Yep.
And it's a process that allows you as the clients to define what's going to happen to your future. The two of you work it out, but you work it out with resources at the table so you can be informed and make informed decisions. And that's,
And the
So
thing,
they each have their own attorney.
yes.
They usually each have their own coach.
Mhm.
And then you have the neutral financial, who's not on anybody's side, and then the child specialist, again, is another neutral. So like Mark said, you have a lot of support. You have your own team. You have an entire team that's working with the two of you together, but then each spouse also has their own team. So they get legal information, they get emotional support, they get a lot of financial information and options presented by the financial. So it's a team process, but the parents are the ones, the spouses are the ones that are in control of the decision making, how quickly you move along, what you decide when you put it into place, all of those kinds of things.
And one of the things that I really love about the collaborative approach is it is client-driven. And like you said, the clients are deciding what's going to happen. So they're thinking about their future and what they want their future to be in a year from now. And even though the relationships are changing, these people are still family.
and it allows us flexibility that you don't get in a courtroom, that a judge just doesn't have.
Yeah.
Because we can craft a settlement that works for your family specifically, as opposed to a judge being constrained, this is what the law says, I've got to make a ruling around this.
Yeah. So Lynn, can I borrow your piece of paper?
Absolutely.
So I have a very high-tech educational aid here. So this is what you and your spouse know about your kids, each other, your marriage, your finances. This, fold it in half, is what your closest friends and family members know about you and your kids and your spouse and your finances. This is what your lawyer is going to know about you and your spouse and your kids and your finances. This is what the court is going to know by the time you institute the rules of evidence and the time constraints that the court has in what they're allowed to listen to and how much time they have to listen to it. So this is what the judge is going to use to make decisions about your finances and your children. Very little information. So if you want the people that have all of this information to be the ones making the decisions, then you need to stay out of court and make those decisions yourself.
And the truth of the matter is most people going through divorce have never been in a courtroom before. It's very uncommon, and so they tend to approach it from the standpoint of sort of Al Pacino in Justice for All. What the judges tend to see is two warring parties who just a few years ago used to be able to make babies and now they can't divide the furniture. There's not always a lot of sympathy that you will get from a judge, and they have a conveyor belt, and there's 30 more behind you, and there's 30 they did earlier in the week.
And another great aspect of collaborative divorce is that mom and her team is thinking about what does dad and his team need? What does dad need to get through this? And it's the other way around too. Dad and his attorney are asking, what does mom need to get through this? And it's very transparent. And I just think that's so helpful to think about what does the other side really need to get through this?
And from an attorney's perspective, it really is a very different approach. When you're in court, your job is to be an advocate for your client and to get absolutely the best outcome that you can get, the other side be damned. In collaborative divorce, you're really, the two lawyers, their job is to help the two parties come up with the best settlement that they can for this particular family under their individual circumstances. So it really is a very, very different approach to divorce. And the whole object is to save you some money, save you some time, save you a whole lot of emotional angst, and preserve as many of the relationships as possible, the parent-child relationship, grandparent relationships, all of those kinds of things. So to hear more about collaborative divorce, mediation, do-it-yourself, and litigation, because that is appropriate for some cases, then again, we'd encourage you to come to the Divorce Options Workshop. The next one is on January 5th. They're from 9 to noon in Carmel Valley, and you can go to the Collaborative Divorce website. It's Collaborative Family Law San Diego. I know, Lynn, I never say it right. What is it?
Collaborative Family Law San Diego.com.
Okay,
We've got a booking button on the website there, so feel free to sign up for any of our workshops.
And you can come by yourself. You can come with your spouse. You can come 1 month. They can come the next. You can bring a friend if you like. It's a very relaxed and casual atmosphere.
Thank you for watching today. Please feel free to write in with any questions, and we'll be happy to respond. And we look forward to seeing you next month for Real Talk Divorce San Diego.